I wanted to be a fashion journalist from very young, like teenager, 13, 14. I was obsessed with fashion magazines. My dream was to be a writer at a magazine and go cover Fashion Week in Paris. And when I was that age, what I imagined wearing, and this is what I think is so brilliant about what Chanel is right now, and Mathieu Blasi, the designer, is it's very emotional and it gets to this like very core desire. That jacket is what I imagined I would wear if I was a fashion journalist as a grown up.
Welcome back to The Materialist. I am Mark Bridge, the founder and CEO of At Present, Matchmaker to Extraordinary Jewelry, and I am your host. Today we have the joy of going into both the actual and the theoretical world of materialism with one of the most thoughtful analysts of it, Lauren Sherman of Puck. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, thanks for having me, Mark.
A delight. Thank you for joining me. I talked with you last year for the Fashion People, and you asked me what makes jewelry valuable. And so as we start here, I'm curious to ask you, after 20 years of watching brands manufacture value, what is the last object that made you forget that this is a manufactured process, made you forget the trick?
I think it was when I bought a Chanel jacket.
When was that?
Last September, when the first Mathieu Blasi collection arrived in stores, and I went to not the shop, one of the shops and in Paris, and I had wanted this jacket when I saw it on the runway, and I tried it on, and I thought it has to be mine. I think because I had seen the pre-order line sheet that the private clients got, and the price of the jacket was significantly more on the line sheet. I don't know if they changed the fabrication or something. But I had said, if it is this certain price, then I would buy it. And it was that certain price. So I didn't buy anything else in the fall, but it was worth it was it the fall or was it? Wait, no, it was February. But living in LA, your seasons get mixed up. This was February because the collection showed in September or October of 2025, and I bought it in February 2026 or March, whatever.
What was the promise of that piece? What was the hook? What was it about that triggered, the part of the brain that said need?
I wanted to be a fashion journalist from very young, like teenager, 13, 14. I was obsessed with fashion magazines, and I had always liked writing and wanted to do journalism from a very young age. My dream was to be a writer at a magazine and go cover Fashion Week in Paris. And when I was that age, what I imagined wearing, and this is what I think is so brilliant about what Chanel is right now, and Mathieu Blasi, the designer, is it's very emotional, and it gets to this like very core desire. That jacket is what I imagined I would wear if I was a fashion journalist as a grown-up. And there's something about all of his work that like really gets back to childhood, and it's very simple. It's not a complex idea. And I saw a quote from him recently where he said his references are things he understands, and it's very understandable and digestible for a broad range of people, which in many cases when something is pretty broad, it's a turnoff to insiders or people who have a lot of knowledge about something. But for me, it just was like this innate instinct that I had to have this jacket. And I was looking at it in my closet the other day, and it's so beautiful. I feel so lucky that I was able to get it.
So let's go back to that moment. You're a kid growing up in Pittsburgh, and you're looking at the world. You're looking at fashion. You're, kind of embodying this dream. Is it the clothes, or is it the idea of, sort of the world that those clothes represent that was the fantasy?
I think for me, it was the clothes. I was just always really interested. My parents both worked in retail, and they liked clothes and they liked brands. And I was just always very interested from, I don't know, very young age, four or five, what I was wearing. I have a photo of in my grandparents' place in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm wearing a red leotard and red tights. And like, I remember making my mom take all these photos of me in this outfit and being like, I want to be a model. I loved dressing up. I loved clothes, not dressing up in costume, like actual clothes. I remember what I wore on the first day of school in first grade. I was always obsessed with color and color combinations and trying new things. And then when I started reading magazines when I was 10 or 11, I realized, oh, there were other people who were interested in this as well. And it was really about like the sneaker or the dress or what have you, the personalities and all of that stuff. I came to as a journalist to really appreciate that fashion is filled with those, but it never felt like it was going to be my world, and it really isn't still. It's my job. It's not like my life. It's hard when you work in an industry like this and you live and breathe it. Of course, most of my friends work in fashion or work in media or whatever, but I have a life outside of that. And I think for me, it's still about the clothes. Like I love clothes. I love looking at them. I love trying clothes on. I love buying clothes. I love seeing other people in clothes and what they wear. It says so much about who people are and where our culture is, and it reveals so much without saying anything, and that's interesting to me.
Do you remember when you encountered the idea of a brand for the first time?
Yeah, I would say it was quite young because my parents were really interested in brands. My dad loved Polo, and I remember
What was their retail business? Were
getting
they in the
sheets
clothing
like
business?
Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren sheets from Marshalls and TJ Maxx. Yeah, so my dad still works retail, but my parents met at a store. They worked at this denim store in Columbus, Ohio. My dad's from Columbus, my mom's from Pittsburgh. She had moved there with my aunt who was going to art school there. And they worked at this store that was called Levitation. It was a denim store, and they were like worked in the shop, but then they also got to be the buyers because that's how retail worked back then. If you worked in a store, you also bought the product for the store. And so my mom, I believe, was the women's denim buyer and my dad was the men's. And my mom got out of retail pretty soon after that, but I was probably 5 or 6 when she stopped doing that. But yeah, they were in it. And then my mom worked in a wedding gown shop for a long time. And my dad worked retail his whole life. He still does. So it was very much like being interested in brands. I remember my mom loved Halston. She loved Halston perfume. She loved Calvin Klein. She was very into minimalism. They both loved Ralph Lauren. American brands mostly, not European. And also those European brands weren't really a thing in the 80s, which is interesting to think about now. But yeah, it was definitely like a part of my life even back then.
And did you understand that those things had status connotations? I mean, my sense is that a lot of your work and writing is about, all right, these things as holders of status. When did that kind of make itself known to you?
Yeah, I think so because I grew up with not a lot of money, and I think it's interesting to think about when you grow up working class, and the way my mom's family in particular thought about being working class. And some of them went to college, my grandpa had gone to college, so it was like they were like a little different than the people whose parents worked in the steel mill in Pittsburgh or whatever. I don't think I started to realize how much brand related to how much money you had, like what brands you wore, until I was a lot older. But I remember going to the Gap when I was in second grade with my dad. My parents had split by then, and he bought me this really amazing green t-shirt and leggings set with paisley all over, like tiny paisleys all over it. But the thing, I just remember my mom being like, Gap is too expensive for us, but really it wasn't. But because we would go to TJ Maxx and it probably cost the same thing that it cost at the Gap. But to her, Gap was like this really nice brand. And so, yeah, I started to understand more of that, I would say, when I was like 7 or 8 or 9, that it imparted value. Also, this is the time of when I went to school, like cross colors, and what was that those t-shirts where you pressed your hand.
Hypercolor, the generic hypercolor.
Hypercolor.
Yeah.
Yeah, bum equipment. That was the stuff that had status in my school when I
No
was,
fear.
yeah. No fear. Yeah, exactly. And also, it was a different time where then I remember when Nautica became a thing. Kids in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania didn't really, no one was, that was those were the high end brands you were looking at. Now it's just so different. I remember I really wanted a Kate Spade bag in high school. No one I went to high school with knew what Kate Spade was. I was like a freak because I knew who that was, and I bought a knockoff bag on eBay or whatever. But yeah, I started to understand that, like, even if it didn't make sense and sometimes the stuff didn't cost what you thought it cost, people associated it with a certain way. And if you shopped somewhere, like I remember one summer I bought a bunch of stuff from the J. Crew catalog. There were no J. Crews in Pittsburgh growing up in the mid 90s. And I remember I went to school, I wore like a sweater and these tweed cargo pants. The first day of school was still so hot. And everybody was like, oh my God, you look like you're in college. Stuff like that. So I did definitely start to understand that, and dressing a certain way could, I've really been tried to live my life where my looks or the way I look or the way I present doesn't affect my work or who I engage with. But the reality is the way you present yourself does communicate something. And as I've gotten older personally, I've got more comfortable with that. But it is certainly, yeah, I'm very interested in why people spend money the way they do and on what and what it says about like human nature and where we are in the world right now.
So you go off to college, and then after college, my sense is you go to London and you plunge into a world that is very status obsessed. That's like populated by some very wealthy customers. That must have been a shock to the system.
Oh my God. It was really interesting to go to a culture where the class system is so clear and it's not a meritocracy. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You're either born rich or you're not. And if you get a bunch of money, you're still not seen as being rich, posh or whatever, like upper class. It's very interesting in that way that you can get rich and you can get money, buy houses, but you're still not one of them because your accent isn't right. And so it was very funny for me. I worked at this company called Quintessentially, which is a concierge service, which is kind of
very, very posh, or
for the very, very posh. There's a funny FT article about them everyone should read. And they had a magazine, and it was very much connected. The private members club thing is big in the US now, but it wasn't back then. And it was very connected to that Annabelle's World and all those people. And what was that bougie, that club that Prince William and Kate would go to? These very posh people. And I got an internship there when I was in college, and they were like, oh, you know how to do some light HTML coding and you want to be a writer and you can Photoshop an image. Why don't you be our assistant when you get back? Why don't you move to London and become our assistant? And I did. And yeah, it was very interesting because it was suddenly you're dealing with, I was not in the service industry in that I didn't have to fulfill requests for these people who wanted reservation at Jay Shiki or whatever, but like, or the Ivy or whatever, but it was like Gwyneth Paltrow's Chris Martin's parents. They would say Gwyneth Paltrow was a client and maybe they did one thing for her, but it was really like doing a bunch of weird stuff, like requests for Chris Martin's parents, like getting them hotel rooms and things like that. So it was very interesting. And it was interesting coming in as an American girl who grew up working class and them not, I'm sure they had a sense, but it didn't really matter because I wasn't a part of the British culture. So I was just like this fun American girl who came and was a hard worker and would do what I needed to do. But I could see even at the company the different ways who mixed with whom, who worked there and who was posh and who wasn't and all of that. And so it was my first real experience of understanding what the luxury industry is. Like Dalesford Organics, they didn't have a bunch of stores at that time, but they would do Christmas baskets and we would promote them, stuff like that, and understand that just like how much money people spend on stuff and why and what that does in part, because the UK is also interesting because people there don't spend a ton of money on clothes. That's not the thing that they, even if they're really rich, they do to an extent, but it's not everybody. That was the era of Topshop. Everybody I worked with was wearing high street. But then they had estates in the country and all of that. So it was interesting.
It's a 19-pound shirt at a 19,000-acre estate. It makes sense.
Yeah,
Did
it's fun.
learning the business of fashion change the way that you saw clothes? You sort of start from the position of I am attracted to the clothes, and then you become a journalist and you start examining this a little bit more, I don't know, anthropologically or journalistically, and you start to see how the sausage is made. Does that change the way in which you view the product?
For sure. I think in some ways it's made me even though I understand that it's all construct and the margins and all of that, and that it's not really based on the actual cost of doing business, the product itself, I think it's made me a little bit numb to prices. I just said I bought a Chanel jacket. I'm very well paid by Puck, but I shouldn't be doing that. That's kind of crazy. It's not weird to me because I'm like, adjusted for inflation, and if I only buy a couple things a year, it's totally worth it and fine. That kind of thinking, I don't think I think that way because I've been exposed. The first story I ever wrote when I was a reporter at Forbes was like a slideshow of the most expensive handbags ever to be auctioned at market or whatever. It's just you do have to. I living in California has been good because it's given me the reality of like how people really live. And if you live in New York or London or Paris or Milan, people are like, yeah, I'm happy to spend $4,000 on a handbag. If you go to the east side of LA where everybody makes a lot of money if they work in TV and they're doing well, but they're like, no, I'm not gonna, I'd rather spend that on a facelift or whatever. So it's been interesting. But anyway, yeah, I think it's made me want fewer things but want nicer things. It's amazing to me that I still enjoy shopping and buying clothes and things. A lot of people who work in the industry, I don't think, or who are journalists, I would say, I think at some point you lose the taste for it. I haven't because I just really love clothes. I'm more like a traditional fashion editor in that way and less like a journalist. I love clothes, but I would say that what it has done is it just I'd say like fast fashion especially. It's not interested in buying it. It's not because I have, to be honest, an ethical problem. Every single thing that's produced is doing something to the environment, is complicated from a production perspective. It's not because of that. It's more because it makes it less interesting. It makes it less exciting to see something and know how many of them actually exist. And so I think what it has done is it's made me probably more, I want the higher standards of what I actually will buy and what I'll put up with I know what kind of margin they're getting, is the quality. I'm not a stickler for, there's been a lot about Charvet recently about whether the quality is good or not. I don't think those shirts are perfect because they're made in a factory in France by real humans, and that's what makes them amazing. So it's like, what do you value? I think that has been, I just think a lot about what is the value of this? Do I want it because I just like it? Do I want it because it's the perfect item? Do I want it because I'm depressed and I need a pick me up? I think a lot about that when I'm buying things for myself.
When you say something is the perfect version, what are you measuring? What is it that tips that scale?
I think is it the perfect version for this time? So a great example is the Row did a pair of sandals probably 5 or 6 or 7 years ago that are looked like a Teva. They did them in leather. Forget what the name of them is, but I think that honestly, I just saw someone whose style I admire wearing them. She has them in cream and in black, and they are the perfect version of that kind of shoe. They look dressed up enough that you could wear them to a dinner because they're leather. They're not. They are a streamlined sort of silhouette that makes them look a little more sophisticated than an actual Teva. And they also are durable and last a long time. So to me, they are, even though they have been around for so long that you think, oh, they might not look cool anymore, they are the perfect version of a sandal that you would want. And that's the kind of thing that I tend to spend money on. I think that black dress that Mathieu Blasi showed at the Chanel Couture show, I won't be buying that. But I do think it's the perfect black dress. And so it's like, it's the right shape. It had the right details. It looked sexy, but it also looked demure. It's about balance. I think like I loved balancing equations in school. And I think about balance a lot in my wardrobe, in what I wear day to day, in why does something become successful and other things don't. I think a lot of times it has to do with proportion and balance and whether or not it's going to make the person feel good and feel comfortable.
You've talked about the margins. You've talked about the myth making. You have described fashion as a construct. What separates a beautiful construct from a con?
Oh my God. I guess it is all a con. If you want to be realistic or about it is all a con. But I think the difference is there some sort of passion in it. And I think the interesting thing when you talk to executives who have been doing it for a really long time, they're doing it because they love it. They love the creativity. And that is just because, is it too expensive, or are they fooling you by convincing you that's a good idea? Sure. But they are also in on it. They also are fooled. And that's the magic of fashion. It's the people who work in fashion are also in love with it. And that's why it works. When someone creates something because they think that there's a demand for it and they think they're going to make a quick buck, that never really works out. It might work out for a couple of years and maybe they'll make some money, but it never lasts.
I was going to say sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So when is that fantasy earned? What separates, the things that are durable and compelling from the things that are flash in the pan?
I think when they put the work in beforehand. Like there's a lot of, you have to spend money to make money in fashion, and I believe that. When you put the work in, and it doesn't always, it's about being measured, but if you do the research and you're interested and you have the talent, and then also there's just good timing for the thing that you're making, that's when it works. Like it is magic. It's like a mix of talent, hard work, and consumer timing, and it just working with the market at the right time, because that doesn't always happen. There are things that are amazing that just never take off because it's not the right time for them, or the creative person doesn't have a good sense. But I think there is a little bit of some magic to it, and you have to suspend belief or suspend disbelief. I don't know what that idiom is, but you have to kind of just let it happen to you. Yeah, and I think that's getting harder and harder in the industry because people feel jaded, because there was, for a long time, people got pretty lazy creatively because they could just sell anything, and now that's not the case. And so it takes a lot more to convince the consumer that something is exciting, but when they do, they go gaga for it.
What has to be true about the object for the story to make sense? Because I don't know if it's possible to disentangle the object from the story, but clearly those things have to be complementary.
Yeah, what do you mean exactly?
Well, take the Charvet example. There is the shirt, and then there is the mythology of the shirt. And the mythology is, here is this company that was independent. It was there since 1830. And then that myth was amplified by the fact that, yes, it was in the Chanel show. You love the shirt. Is it possible to say why you love the shirt?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do think in this era, the product is the marketing more than ever. Charvet is from another time where the product is not the marketing. But what I will say for me personally as a consumer of Charvet is that I am not a trad person, which Charvet is extremely traditional to me. I think there are a few reasons why it became so popular with people in the fashion industry over the last 15 years or so. One is because fashion insiders kind of got sick of mega brands. And this is a singular brand on Place Vendôme that sells $400 shirts, which is not that expensive. And you can get them custom and they're $600, which is even still not that expensive compared to things. And it felt special. I started buying them about 10 years ago. And I would say I bought slippers first and then bought a shirt. And for me, I had never been a button-up shirt person before. I was always like, ugh, I just never liked the way they looked. I didn't like the way they fit. I tried a million kinds. And with Charvet, it's interesting. I went to school drop-off this morning and I was going for a run. And I just grabbed, and I had a black tank top and black shorts on and my running clothes. And I just grabbed one to wear over my outfit for the school run. And it looked so good and it was so light. The other thing, there's tons of weights of fabric. There's a lot of options. Like I have the men's shirts, I have the women's shirts. Like a lot of the women I know don't wear the women's shirts. I like the women's shirts. I think that for me, it was the first button up I ever had and honestly, I was looking through my closet. It's still really the only ones that I wear. Like I have one from Dries Van Noten. I love Dries. I never wear it. There's just something about the way that the fabric falls and the way they fit me in particular that I really like. So I think the product in that case lives up to the marketing. That being said, like I mentioned, there's been all these videos of the quality is so bad with the shirt. Give me a break. You don't know what you're talking about. And also these shirts are being made in a factory in France. They're not going to be perfect. And I think that's something that people don't really understand about things that are not necessarily handmade, but a lot of human touch, that perfection is not the thing. It's about like how that they make you feel good. And so that's a case where I think you see that a lot when like something gets big or someone wants to have backlash. Suddenly you see a bunch of Reddit threads about quality being bad or whatever, and you're like, do you actually know what you're talking about? I don't think so. Yeah. That is an interesting case of, I think that the product does live up to the marketing, and the marketing was just so right for this time. Of course they ended up selling to Chanel. After it happened, I was like, I can't believe I didn't predict this in a column. I feel dumb.
You talked about price and the role that plays in a Charvet shirt. What role does price play? Is that evidence of value, or is it just part of the stagecraft and the myth making?
My favorite, like, Harvard Business School jargony thing is price value equation. I love talking about it. I think it's really important, and it's like, price, am I getting enough for my money? So in America, it's really hard to have price value equation because of like a high price value equation, because everything's discounted. So people are like, yeah, that's too expensive. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. They want a bunch of stuff, but they want it really cheap. I think that's what every single decision you're making, you're like, is this worth what I'm paying? And I think like a Charvet selling 400 euro shirts, like, yes, that's expensive. I understand it's a lot of money for a lot of people, but you go to any department store and you try to buy a shirt and it's going to be $1,000 now from a designer brand. So like the idea that you were getting a high quality designer thing. And then the other part of Charvet that's interesting is it's really color forward, and they have a lot of colors and they're not afraid of color. So when color changes, trends change, you could always go there and find something that connected back to what was happening in the broader market. So I think they imparted a lot of value by not charging what the designer brands charged, and then on top of it, having a lot of options for people. So if you want a pair of slippers from there, you can get them in suede or leather and they have 50 different colors, or a very nice scarf. It's not totally dissimilar to Hermes, where there is like a lot of stuff there that is cheaper than you would expect it to be. It's not cheap, but it's less expensive than you would expect it to be given the sort of value that they are able to convey through their marketing, or they don't do marketing, they say, through their communications.
Which is evidence of the best marketing imaginable. Is shopping the wrong place to expect people to express their values? My sense of your work on Victoria's Secret was sort of playing with this question of ideology and what is the role of my philosophical beliefs, my beliefs of feminism, my beliefs about how the world should work, in buying a product.
Yeah, I think that most people do not vote with their dollars, but I do think where you shop communicates a lot about what you believe and who you are. I think with something like lingerie, no one can see that but you and who you choose to show it to. It's not something that's, although right now everybody's wearing these lace slips everywhere, so those are exposed. But I think it was interesting, the pink, Victoria's Secret pink, these t-shirts became really popular in the US a few years ago among a certain demographic, and that conveyed some sort of thing, but the people who were wearing those, I don't think they were even aware the Victoria's Secret was in the kind of crux of the Me Too movement and what was going on with that. So it's interesting. No, I don't think that people typically vote with their dollars, and when they do, no one really cares. I think the bigger thing is that certain brands, showing a name brand on your body or buying something, conveys who you are as a person. Less political than a lot of people would like to believe. They want to believe that they are altruistic and they're only going to shop certain things, but if a bra fits you really well, you're going to buy it.
So there was a decline in that brand. The narrative was it's because they're morally repugnant. And then we've seen over the last year that brand is back. It's not because they're any more virtuous, is it?
A few things. One is that they have a female CEO who has hired a really amazing marketing executive to help her and it's much less about, it's still trashy and sex driven, but it's all through the female gaze, and it's real. Talking about putting in the work, they're putting in the work. It's not like this woman Hillary
Vicky went to therapy.
Yeah, exactly. This woman Hillary Super coming on, I remember listening to a podcast where they had an ad where they, I think, actually used the term woke or something. Like, it was very silly, and I was like, this is such bullshit. She decided, I'm not going to say all this stuff that we're inclusive and we're blah, 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 even though they are. She's like, I'm just going to make trashy, sexy stuff and market it the way it used to be marketed, but less leering and less like, I'm doing this for a man. And it's really worked. It's been impressive. I didn't think that they could do it. I thought it was a brand on decline. It would be owned by a licensing firm in 2 years. And look, maybe that'll happen 10 years from now. I don't know. It usually happens. But I've been really impressed by her ability to, she understood that she still had a huge market share. They still make, I think, 60% of the bras that people buy in the US. She understood that was value, and that wasn't going away. And also, Hillary came in at a time when underwire bras became popular again. For 10 years, it was about non-underwire bras, and Victoria's Secret really missed that moment. And so she kind of came back when people wanted to wear underwires and express their sexuality. These lace slips everybody's wearing, it's connected. They're not going to buy those from Victoria's Secret. But I think this is a great example of putting in the work, having the value, and then meeting the moment. And it's been nice to watch. It's a feel-good story.
There's been so much talk about the experiential economy and all of these competitors for fashion, whether it's travel or food or now kind of wellness, whether we're including sort of the GLP-1s in that. Has status moved from the label on your body to what I am posting and what I look like and what I've done to my body?
I think for sure. I would say that it, you see it. It's hard. It's easy when you work in the fashion industry or you live in a major city. Yeah, and I would include Seattle in this because people in Seattle, it's very cosmopolitan. People dress up still and all of that. I don't know if you agree with me, but it feels like to me when I go there,
They wear the
people.
good Arc'teryx. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the thing. I always use this example of I went to La Jolla. We went to the San Diego Zoo with my kid one January, and we stopped in La Jolla at this shopping center where they had a nice bougie restaurant for lunch. It's a Sunday. My husband and I are wearing jeans. I think my husband was wearing corduroys. I was wearing jeans. We were literally the only people with hard pants on. Every single person in that shop was wearing leggings or sweatpants. And this La Jolla is a very wealthy region. This is where your customer is living, luxury brands. And no one was wearing anything formal in any way. And there's no way you're going to return to that. People talk about the return of the suit. Sure, yes, the suit is very fashionable right now. I love suits. I'm excited about that. It does not mean people are going to wear suits to work every single day again. It's just never, once you go a certain way, casual wise, you're never going back. And I think the thing that they are spending their money on is lymphatic drainage and plastic surgery and half facelifts and tummy tucks and working out, spending $50 a class. This is what people are spending their money. Teeth whitening. It is what the future is. It's you go on a GLP-1 and suddenly you need to have a whole body makeover. And that's what our future looks like for the next 10 years, not buying handbags a month.
And is that seen as more virtuous than buying the handbags, right? One feels like I am investing in me and one feels profligate.
I think in America, yes. We're just a culture of consumption, but yes, I think spending
But do
money.
people think about that as consumption? I guess is the question.
I don't think they realize it, but it is. We live in a culture of consumption. We are programmed to consume and buy. Everybody wants everything on sale here. Spending a lot of money on clothing and fashion accessories or whatever is not seen as, that's why hard jewelry has become such a important market and an area of growth because it feels like it's worth it. It doesn't feel stupid to spend money on a diamond necklace. It feels stupid sometimes to spend money on a bag or a pair of shoes that are going to get beaten up and you can only wear for a couple of years anyway.
And so is that the fashion world not having anything interesting to say? Is that the competitors having a more compelling claim?
I think it's just a consolidation story. The industry is almost fully consolidated. In the 80s, no one was in America was buying Dior. Like Bernard Arnault bought it for $1 in 84 or whatever, that whole story. No one was buying Louis Vuitton bags. Like it just wasn't happening. Or if you were buying Gucci bags, they were like the junky ones from Macy's that one of the Gucci family did some weird deal with. It wasn't a part of and it became a huge part of popular culture and consumption and all of that. And I think it's just consolidated and people have moved on. I don't think these things are going away. Like they will always exist, but it's not going to be the sort of central part of our lives the way it was for the last 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of monoculture, I started at present as a response to that. I thought, 6, 7 years ago that the hegemony of big European luxury houses and everybody signaling who they wanted to be with the same 5 items was going to reach its, whatever, zenith. And for maybe another 5 years, I was wrong. But I think that we are getting now to a point where that's reached its saturation point. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that it was slowed down by COVID and the pandemic because people didn't have anything to do, so they kept spending on physical items. But yeah, I think that in 2019, I was feeling it. I was like, this is a bubble and it's going to burst. And didn't burst. It burst 3 years after I thought it would because people were like, well, we have nothing to spend money on, so let's just buy more wallets or whatever. I think now that we're back to quote unquote normal, just priorities have shifted again.
And is there space then for growth of independent brands and unique voices, or the structure is just such that instead I'm going to Portofino and I'm gonna, spend a lot of money in the spa?
I think that there is room for independent brands. And I actually think, I was thinking about it. I was talking to someone, a really great number for a big fashion brand that doesn't sell a lot of accessories is $100 million a year. Like that's tiny, but to me, that's $100, $200 million a year in revenue that you mostly sell clothes. That's a great business. You could still do that. It's getting harder because there are fewer multi-brand stores, so you have to have your own physical retail. So it's just getting more expensive to do it. But yeah, I think there is opportunity. It's just a smaller market. Like everything, it's fragmented. So you find your customer. It's almost easier to find your customer, but your customer base is probably going to be smaller than it was in the 1990s or whatever. But yeah, I think it's totally possible. And I think people who are enthusiasts, design enthusiasts, fashion enthusiasts, they want something unique. I think that's why you look at the success of Alaya, which is owned by Richemont, which obviously owns Cartier and Van Cleef and Arpels. But I think Alaya has been successful because they let Peter, the designer, who was the designer there, do what he wanted. And it also was really small, and it grew significantly because the people buying Cartier bracelets or whatever, they wanted something interesting to wear with them, and that provided it. I think that there's opportunities to do those and start new brands as well. The challenge is just the cost. And you look at something like the Row, and one of the reasons they've been able to be so successful is because they didn't have that worry in the back of their mind that where am I going to get my money from? They've been really smart, and they brought on the right investors, but they also had that security personally. And I think that is a huge reason that they were able to be so disciplined and build it to what it is now. And even if you look at what they're working on, how that brand is going right now, I think it was really big during the pandemic. It's ebbed. I think it's the biggest thing in the world anymore because people have moved on to a different aesthetic. But that's okay because they're private and they can manage it out. Most people can't. They panic. If like they're suddenly not the coolest brand in the world anymore, what do? Most companies that are independent have investors who expect it to keep growing. And I think the Row has been smart where they have brought on the right investors that they can take their time and they don't have to rush. And so that's a great privilege, but they've also done good things with that privilege. I think it's possible. It's just hard.
It seems like there is a financing challenge or gap or opportunity. There was a generation of brands that started 2010 on that raised a whole bunch of venture money and created a lot of really boring businesses that scaled and then died. There are people who are independently wealthy who can execute a vision because they've produced 120, boxed VHS tapes that they sold to, 12-year-olds. If I'm an independent designer today and I want to grow a business, how do I finance it?
Oh my God. One way is your own money. One way is a family office. One way is a strategic group. You could do venture capital. You can do a bunch of different things. I think the best thing to do is to start out really small because even making a sample set is expensive. So if you want to do it, in jewelry, if you want to do diamonds and things, you have to have money. You can't do it otherwise. So you need to find someone to finance it. But that stuff, the honest truth is it doesn't usually work out. Sometimes it does. And people love it so much they can't help themselves. That's the thing. I have a friend who has started 2 businesses and is starting a third, and he has a really good attitude about it. He understands, when the businesses have closed, he hasn't been he's like, it's like a end of a relationship or whatever. I'll move on.
I learned something.
But,
okay.
Exactly. But I think it's still, you have to kind of go into it knowing that some of it's out of your control and that you aren't, usually it doesn't work out. It just doesn't. Even look at something like Michael Kors. He, I think, went bankrupt before. And then if he didn't file for Chapter 11 ever, he had tons of financing issues. And then it was owned by LVMH and LVMH sold it. And then he became a billionaire. And now they're having trouble again. So it's just, it's not easy, but you have to do it because you just feel like there's nothing else you want to do.
Because you're possessed. What parallels does this have in journalism? Because it seems like you have created an independent model where you can exist and have a unique voice that is outside of what used to be institutional media.
Yeah, I've always been interested. Mostly worked at startups. Even Forbes was a family run company, but I worked at, by the end, it was just one company. But I started at the Forbes.com, which was like a separate business than Forbes magazine. And then when I was there, they merged them all. But they had investors when I was there. And the only bigger company I ever worked at was Condé Nast, which compared to Bloomberg is tiny. But I would say, I think like when you look at, I'm interested in what are sustainable business models in media and how do you, and I do think, yeah, it parallels fashion in that what's really works right now is a really big brand like the New York Times that's managed super well, or a smaller company like Puck that is being careful about keeping the quality high, because all the wires and stuff, that's all going to be AI generated. Most journalism will be like partially AI sooner than later. So it's like, where do you go? And Business of Fashion was another place I worked for a long time. Really good business model. It's like trade magazines, trade papers need to exist because the industries that they write about need to know what's happening. You need intelligence, and so you're willing to pay for that because your company will typically pay for it, or you can write it off. So to me, Business of Fashion was a great business model. I think Puck, the reason it's worked so well is because they built the businesses around the journalists. So when I came in, they were like, okay, you're going to write honestly about the fashion industry. We're not going to try to sell some fashion brands advertise with me, some don't. It just depends on sort of their level of appreciation for journalism. But it's not like, it doesn't matter because they built it around my talent and what I can bring to the table. And so there are plenty of advertisers who are interested in that. It might not be like a traditional fashion magazine, but there's plenty of demand. The thing that I was able to avoid was ending up at one of those startups where they raised way too much money and tried to scale in a way that was obviously not ever going to work. I could see that from the outside. I think that the disappointing thing is the sort of other local newspapers that haven't managed to figure out a business model that works, and why they haven't, whereas the New York Times has, is a question. And the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. Is it because those are just like, they eat everything up? I don't know. And will it just become a point where the New York Times becomes the local paper for everybody, for all these other cities? It's a question. But yeah, I'm just interested in, I've always preferred working at startups. They're much more secure than a legacy publication. There's no layoffs at startups, especially not with the journalists. There are very few people that I started with who are still in journalism. And that has been because I have not stayed in legacy media. When I worked at Forbes, I was like, this is goofy. There's going to be layoff. There were like 4 rounds of layoffs when I worked there I was only there for 3 years. It was just, I was like, I got to get out of this because this is not going to keep going, but something will. And so I like the idea of being part of something new.
It seems like there has been a K-shaped development in media. You have the very large global brands, and then you have the personalities. Yeah. I don't think about subscribing to Puck. I subscribe to you. And when I listen to Acquired, I listen to Ben and David, right? I connect with those personalities. Do I have any feeling about the Seattle Times? No, not particularly.
Yeah. It's too bad.
I think so, because I think there is a job that those kinds of things can do, but you have to have a business model that works.
I agree. I agree. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I think the big mistake newspapers made was not making the online paywalled 30 years ago. That is and obviously no one did it. So you can't go back. But I think that was the biggest mistake.
As we close out here, I want to ask sort of the materialist question, which is that if your son had to understand you through one object, not necessarily the most expensive or the most professionally impressive, what would it be?
That's fun. That's a really interesting one. Because I was thinking about what he was asking. I had lipstick on yesterday, and he was like, "Why are your lips so pink?" I have an Hermes and a secondhand Hermes Bolide red bag in pebbled leather in that classic. I don't know if it's the Hermes Rouge or not, but it's a pretty classic Hermes red. And I would say that bag sort of represents my life. I loved red growing up. It's not fancy, but if you go, I take it to soccer practice. No one knows it's an Hermes bag. And it is, I don't know. I think my husband bought it for me for Christmas one year, and it wasn't that expensive, but it's just a thing of kind of represents that person who was a 14-year-old who wanted to go to Fashion Week, and that I got to do that, but that I'm also still a normal human being. It's like represents all of that side of me and then also the normal parts of me. So I don't know if that's a good answer. I bet people have way less materialistic.
No, I think it's a great answer given kind of who you are and what you do and kind of the codes that you have appreciated. Last question, as always, if there were 3 brands or artists or publications that deserve more awareness and more attention, are there people that you would suggest?
Oh, that's so fun. There is a publication called Gift Guide. It's a Substack by a writer named Caitlin Phillips, and I think it's just extremely well done. She is a publicist, but also she started out wanting to be a writer, and and decided to go into publicity, but is kept writing on the side, mostly about art. But Gift Guide, it kind of came out of, she used to do this Google Doc holiday gift guide that honestly is the best gift guide of any. It's the only one you really need to read. And I'm a big consumer of gift guides, and I love studying them and evaluating them. But she writes a lot, and she's really well read. There will be like tiny bits of gossip about literary and art world and people that I'd be interested in, but probably wouldn't know. And she has great taste. She'll have some weird pants from Portugal in there that I would have never heard of. She's very knowledgeable, and I think it's the best magazine that exists right now. In terms of artists, I love this artist. I would say my friend Jake Longstreth, who is a LA-based artist. He's really good. I think everybody knows he's good, though. But I would say we bought a piece from this artist, Sophie Treppendahl, who I believe is based in New Orleans. I really like her work, and I think it reminded, we went to see the Matisse show in Paris, and I could see where she was inspired. And so many artists are inspired by Matisse's kitchen scenes and things like that. It's so amazing. And then I would say in terms of brands, I have become much more interested in jewelry in the past few years. And there's a lot of amazing independent brands. And I really want to, I said this when you did my podcast, I really want to buy some diamond piece. I haven't done it yet because I'm being I want it to be the right thing. And I thought, I wear a lot of vintage, so I was like, maybe I should buy a vintage piece. I don't know, but there's a lot of really amazing jewelry designers who have come up recently that I love, like Charlotte Chenet and Sophie, I think it's Sophie Brilla Bray is how you say it. I love her stuff. But I would say that the thing that I always come back to is Sophie Buhai, who is mostly works in silver, but does a bit of gold. And also, yeah, another friend of mine is Danielle Sherman. She's amazing. Sophie is on my mind because just released a book of this exhibition she did at this gallery in Paris. And I've known Sophie, I don't know, probably 20 years because she used to have a fashion brand called Vina Cava that I really loved. And I profiled her for the Little British Indie magazine when I first moved to New York. And she honestly just has the best taste of anyone I've ever met. Anything that she wears or designs, I just love. And I've bought a lot of her jewelry because when you talk about price value equation, like there's just something about what she does that is, I don't know, it feels so worth it. And I messaged her the other day saying, Sophie, are you going to ever do diamonds? And I don't know if she ever will, but I would love her to, because if she did them, I would buy one in a second. She's really special. And she has a great business and doesn't need a ton of promo, but I think she deserves her flowers because she's been working really hard for a long time, as do Danielle and Charlotte and all of these amazing. I also love Completed Works. Anna, who's based in London. It's really good. But yeah, there's so many amazing jewelers who deserve more of the market share of this market, a market that we know is pretty much mostly unnamed stuff.
Absolutely. Lauren Sherman, if people want to find you in the ether, where do you live on the clouds?
My Instagram is Lapramidi, that anymore. And you can always go to puck.news to check out my work. And yeah, that's basically it.
Subscribe. You will learn something. You will be amused, and you will be more educated after you have a chance to read Lauren's work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Such a delight. Thank you for joining.